Hi. Wow. Thanks to the two of you for bringing together two of the things I cherish most in this world, tennis and documentary film. Nice to meet you both. I'm Paul.
Nepal.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, Danny. Loved watching this film. Great technical acumen, historical context. You captured emotional resonance with a portrait of a complex man. And Stan, it's nice to meet you. I'm a lifelong tennis player, and my daughter actually trained a little bit at your academy. Great to meet you. So you are surprisingly a hip hop cultural icon. Congratulations on the success of that shoe.
Thank you, thank you. It's been fun to see the different subcultures that have gravitated towards that shoe.
It really has, and I love that the film captures that as well as the entirety of your playing career. I'm a big fan of doubles, which I think is often overlooked, and you were one of the great teams ever, you and Bob Lutz, even though you were apparently kind of an unlikely pairing.
Well, we worked well together because he was solid, didn't make many mistakes, and I was kind of aggressive and took chances and took advantage of his setups that he had for me. And so I could get enough balls in play. He could handle his side of the court very well.
I almost got the impression from the film that the two of your on-court personalities were a little opposite from your off-court personalities. You know, on-court, he was a little bit more of a steady guy, and off-court, a bit more of a risk taker. And then did that reverse itself a little bit?
That's a pretty good explanation, really. We were different in that sense, and I was not as consistent, but took chances and he was, yeah, he would barely miss a return sometimes in some matches. It was great.
That is a wonderful skill to have on the court. It's not one I have myself, but a wonderful skill.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
You had epic battles, particularly with Ilya Nastase at Wimbledon. Loved seeing that in the film. I didn't know the little anecdote behind that routine looking backhand overhead he had at the end of that match.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. That kind of it ended so suddenly. I was as surprised as anybody.
And I recall that he had a very solid shot there, like Velas. If it went up, to that side, he could knock it away in any direction.
Well, he hit it really well and hit the top of the tape and just wobbled for a few minutes. And that was, but he didn't miss hit it. He hit it really solid. And he was surprised, I think, that it didn't go over the net.
I can't imagine what a feeling that was for you. And I also recall having read about a pretty epic Davis Cup tie in Romania, kind of an ugly one, right? Was that the same year?
It was the same year, and it was probably the most interesting week of my life, actually, to be in Romania and with all the things that were going on. The Israeli athletes had been killed, and so we had this tight security, and the courts were the red clay, and they're being watered, and the linesmen were all seem to be kind of related to Tyriac somehow, and there's a lot going against us, and so it was that was probably one of the most satisfying, I guess, experiences that Davis Cup match in Romania.
It had to have been. You had a single opponent, an entire team, a stadium. It sounds like an entire country against you and Van Dillen and the rest of the team back then.
It was a one-sided affair for sure.
Stan, I'm 64 years old, about a decade behind you. I'm guessing I grew up in the 70s, a pretty passionate tennis fan. And I feel like the game really changed a lot during that decade. I didn't know, for instance, about your tennis elbow. And I'm just wondering, what were your thoughts on the guard that came up behind you, like the Connors and Borg and McEnroe, and that generation of players, and how that impacted yours?
Well, it did impact me, and I actually played against all those guys, actually a fair amount. I played Borg, I think, 3 times, and McEnroe 3 times, and Connors probably 8 or 9 times, but, that was those are three of the best players to ever play the game. And I did have start having problems with my elbow and was not able to perform as well as I would like, and it was a frustrating time for me. But those guys certainly, took the bull by the horn and then and dominated for about 5 or 6 years. Vilas was in there as well on the clay, and Borg and on the clay as well as on the Wimbledon. So it was a great era of players, at the end of the '70s and early '80s.
There were changes in technologies then too. And I played with your model wood racket, as did you for a while. When did you make that switch to the graphite
Yeah,
generation?
it was around '77. I remember going to China with this non-wood racket. It was a graphite Wilson racket that uh, was very different. But that you're right, it was a tremendous. Borg tried to come back playing with a wood racket after taking a couple of years off, and that racket was passe by that point. He should have been going to a non-wood racket.
I'm also glad that Danny's film addresses your role in the foundation of the ATP. And I'm just wondering if I can tap your thoughts briefly just on the state of the pro game today, what you think of it.
Well, it's a mixed bag right now. I mean, golf has gone through a horrific situation the last couple of years, and tennis hopefully is not going to go that direction. But there are elements that are moving that way, and not only the Saudi Arabia money, but just a different mentality of some of the guys on the tour of having a premier league sort of situation and then a secondary league that would feed into it. And uh, it's really a cross point now of what might happen. Especially with Saudis being involved, both the men's and the women's side. It's hard to know what's going to happen right now.
It really is. Do you see the men's and the women's tours as being able to benefit from working together, or do you think they are best off as separate entities and games?
I think that that's one positive thing that's happening. It seems like the men's and women's tour are starting to work together more, and certainly that these 1,000 level tournaments, most of them have men and women, not just the men. And so that part of it will enable, I think, the two associations to maybe work together a little closer as well.
Thank
So that could be a
you.
positive thing.
Absolutely. Danny, can I just compliment you on a really impressive documentary and just ask how you came to the project?
Really appreciate that. Very much so. I came to the project via LeBron James and Maverick Carter's company, Spring Hill, and they brought it, and they had said, "Hey, we have this, we like you as a director. We have this one project that we'd want to consider you for." And I said, "What is it about? Who is it?" And they said, "Stan Smith." And I literally said, "Yes," like on the spot. Of course, there's a process in meeting the talent, making sure my vision is received well with Stan. And it was a real privilege to be able to tell this story. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what a director of a documentary film does in terms of story and structure and shooting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as a filmmaker, I worked both in documentary and scripted, so I feel like, and commercial, so I feel like I can remove hats, but I usually sort of bring all approaches and synthesize them in any project. And in documentary, I think the most important thing is to listen, is to enter the project. One, you should have a vision, but once you get into the process, you are going to unearth things that might fundamentally change the way you look at the film. And don't be closed off to it. I think it's easy to get caught up in your vision, but you should be open. You should lead with curiosity, and you should have empathy in going into the process. So I think as a director, those are paramount. But then looking at, I mean, everyone's different, but for me, what's important is looking at the prevailing themes of the film and try to, try to extract, try to enhance the style so it can enhance the story, but not bury the story, enhance it. So for this, you know, it became clear there's a mythology around Stan. So I was like, let's unpack this mystery. And in that, I'm not sure if you noticed in the film, but in the title sequence and throughout, there's a bit of a shadow motif, right? Where you're seeing the shadow of Stan, you're seeing the shadow of his body playing, or the shadow of a ball. And for me, that was all connected to the mystery of Stan Smith. But hopefully it wasn't overbearing. Hopefully it was just light enough. And so that's important because it's very easy to fall into the same few elements of a documentary. You got the interview, you got archival, you may have reenactments, and how do you do those differently? And that's just me as a filmmaker. I'm always trying to explore different ways of telling story because that's what excites me. Like sort of have this restless creative spirit. And so Stan's story kind of gave me a little bit of room to play, but you always want to have fidelity to the story. You want to do it justice. So it's balancing those two things as a director, and hopefully we did that.
You haven't used the word veritas. It's,
Verite, that's right. Actually,
that,
Stan, you caught
that's
me.
the word Margie always remembers. It's got to be veritas.
Verite. But yeah,
Verite.
that's the fourth element. There's the interview, verite, archival, and reenactments. And those are the four pillars of doc, but sometimes you can, sort of push the envelope and do things differently. But yeah, I kept telling them, let's shoot, we want to shoot verite of just you and the family, or you and this, and they were like, what are you talking about? And I had to say, oh, we're just flies on the wall, and for the most part.
He just wanted us to dance together after dinner every night. That's what we normally do. So
I know we never included that, but
It was lovely. Listen, my last question. Thank you both for telling this story. Our world needs more like yours, and ones that how we can model and illustrate anti-racist behaviors and really be role models for the youth and those who follow us in our lives. So congratulations and thank you both for your time.
thank you so much.